Okay, so we're here with Dr. Keith Livingstone. Keith's going to be over here for the next 2 weeks in Ireland, and we're based out here in Glendalough now at the moment. We're in Rennie's house. And so just a little bit about Keith's background. Keith originally born in Kenya, then eventually moved to New Zealand and lived there for 18 years, and where he eventually came across Arthur Lydiard's training. He settled in Australia, and he is the most recent author of 2009 of the acclaimed Healthy Intelligent Training, which you can see there. And he's also a doctor of chiropractic. So Keith, you're over here for the next 2 weeks. So just give us a brief description of what you're going to be doing over here with Champions Everywhere in the next 2 weeks.
Well, it's very exciting really, because in Renee's vision and your vision for Champions Everywhere, we have the possibility of reigniting the great Irish distance and middle distance running traditions of the past. Nothing that's being done hasn't been done before.
Okay, great. So tell us, why did you decide in the first place to actually write about Arthur Lydiard and his training principles?
Well, I was in Australia and seeing great talents just go down the drain, shockingly bad and inappropriate training. People who could have been world class, qualifying for major games and all going down the toilet. And I thought, why don't they know any better? Surely they know to do this, because in New Zealand under Arthur Lydiard we had a structure and a system of doing things which was entirely logical, but it didn't seem to have crossed the Tasman particularly, although they had a very good system of their own which pushed out world-class athletes obviously over the years. But at the grassroots level, this complete lack of logic and knowledge just appalled me, So it's really out of frustration, because I could see in these guys a bit of myself, and I just wanted to save other people of a high level of achievement from the mistakes that I'd made myself. So I've sort of spent the last 25 years sort of trawling through the literature and figuring out all the bits and pieces that I didn't do, in training, because I made every mistake in the book. I got away with it to an extent, but I always think maybe I could have done a bit better, as most of us do.
Okay, so the book then was first published in 2009, and I think we're on to the third print edition now. So what type of a reception has the book got worldwide now at this stage? And what type of feedback have you had from coaches and runners?
Oh, a lot of very good feedback, and on Amazon for a year or two it had 5 out of 5 star rating.
And do you ever get emails from people with their stories?
Oh yeah, I get questions from all around the world, and questions on various parts of training, and specific questions, and I answer them as fully as I can, because I want to create a grassroots sort of knowledge. I'm not into it. Obviously, you're not going to make money from a book, or much money, because professionally I could make more money out of my profession in a week than I actually made from this book. So it's nothing to do with that. It's more of a curiosity or love or enthusiasm thing, and I just doing it for those reasons, and that was probably the heart of why I wrote the book. And it grew like topsy, because at first it was just a little PowerPoint for local coaches, then it grew into a Word document of about 20 pages. More and more questions were coming in from coaches and people who'd sort of happened upon it. Then it grew slowly, bit by bit, and then it grew into the book, which I didn't even submit for publication. I just sent a draft of this to friends in the States who are top-level athletes who'd done the Lydiard work, and they sort of submitted it to various people, and it ended up with a publisher without me doing a thing. So it's bizarre.
Excellent. So, and you were a pretty handy runner yourself back in the day. Do you want to maybe give some of your highlights? Tell us a bit about some of your highlights.
Well, highlights. Well, originally I was a kid who's little skinny kid. I hadn't reached 5 stone by the time I entered secondary school. And I remember a teacher when I was about 10 at primary school saying my legs were too skinny to be good at sport. And I really didn't like that. So immediately after that, we had this underwater swimming race at primary school. Well, it wasn't a race, it was to see how far you could go underwater. and there's this really flash athletic kid called Bernie White. Of course, he went out and he did a vast distance underwater, but I was very close underwater. Second, I was just steaming underwater to prove him wrong. So I sort of did things to prove people wrong. So that's been the story of my life. And when I got to secondary school, I was aware that I could run a long way easily, and say in soccer training, always not be particularly puffed after the run around the fields, which everyone else was dragging themselves in. So I was aware I had some kind of ability. It wasn't until I was about 16, and my brother came back from another school where he'd been training. Incidentally, he went to the same school that Peter Snell and Arthur Lydiard went to for the art program. And I was at a Catholic boys' school as a boarder, and of course he was pretty out there, Colin. He came back with having made the school athletic teams himself, but this is interesting because until the age of 15, neither he nor I had any particular interest in athletics, but the 1974 Commonwealth Games, which had some phenomenal outcomes for New Zealand, really sparked an interest in athletics.
Okay, great. And so, what type of a runner were you? So, what was your forte in athletics?
Well, it could have been shorter distances, but I sort of ran a distance which I found very comfortable to win at. So that was initially 3,000 metres. I started with that. My first official race in a championship race was in bare feet at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland, and I won it in an Auckland record, 8:54 at the time, for 3,000 metres in bare feet. But however, I had done a lot of aerobic endurance work before that, quite a lot by today's standards.
So that brings me on to your coach, Barry McGee, who's actually a second generation Lydiard coach. What type of a coach was he, and I suppose what made him such a good coach?
Well, Barry was a case in point. He started off as a local kid, as all the champions were, just one of the local sort of government housing kids. They all hung around the club that eventually formed around Arthur. So he was a great encourager, and Barry was the same. And Barry regards to this day Arthur Lydiard as like a second father, because his own father died when Barry was very young and left Barry and his family orphaned. So Barry was an encourager. He let you learn by your own mistakes. If you said you wanted a bit of speed work, he said, well, go and do it, but he'd give you a bit more again, and then you'd muck up a race because of it. He sort of was very shrewd, and but not judgmental, so he wouldn't bail you out after a bad race. He'd sort of inspire you by he kept you eager, though, you were saying. Oh yes, sorry, I dropped out there for a second. He'd say things like, "Oh, I don't think you can beat so and so," knowing full well that I just wanted to beat the living daylights out of this fella. And of course, he just goad you, and he said, "Oh, if you can get within 10 seconds, that would be a great victory." So he's a bit of a psychologist.
This will get you riled up, yeah.
Yeah. So he knew how to press the right buttons. So he's a student of psychology, really. And he'd do the same thing with Kevin Ryan, who's this guy who tended to double whatever Barry gave him. He's just a workhorse. So he'd give him half of what he wanted to do on the schedule. So it eventually worked out kind of right. So very nice man. So
we've got a number of events coming up. So what can any attendees to the events? We've got the Marathon Expo. We've got a talk on 53 degrees. And we've a few other events coming up. So what can attendees expect to be hearing in these events?
Well, I'd like to sort of give an overview of the whole concept, both simply and if people want it in more depth. But in a nutshell, the whole philosophy is about building a massive pyramid of aerobic work to fully develop the heart and the capillary system of the muscles, so that they can then easily do the hard work which comes later on, leading up to a peak race. So this is an art that's been totally lost in many places now, because everyone these days is into shortcuts. You can't take shortcuts when you're building race. And we see this in the Olympics. Certainly people could do one-offs, very fast times, but in the Olympics these days, if they haven't done this sort of work, they're the people who sort of do fast times going into the Olympics, don't make the heats or don't get through or reach the semi, can't reach the final. But a Lydiard trained athlete, if he's at the top of his game in the world, he'll get better and better through the heats and rounds because the work has been appropriate, and he can absorb these sort of hard efforts and then come up again for more.
So it's just to finish off there, how important was Lydiard to the history of athletics, in your opinion?
In my opinion, well, he's the giant. And look, he was the founder, at the end of the day, of the jogging movement. He's the founder of the movement which created top elite performance. Really, he's the sort of, he didn't want, you know, he started off just as a guy who wanted to get fit, but he ended up as world renowned, and Runners World named him the coach of the century.
I think that sums it up pretty well. Dr. Keith Livingstone, thanks very much.
Thank you.